Welcome to Rising Parent, your go-to podcast for navigating the sometimes stormy waters of childhood. I'm your host, Vanessa, and we are here to help you protect your child from the harsh reality of bullying. In this episode, Edna and Tim will dive deep into the world of bullying, uncovering its causes and effects. They'll discuss practical strategies to empower your child, build their resilience, and create a supportive environment. So, grab a cup of tea and let's work together to create a kinder world.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today as we take a deep dive into helping kids deal with bullying. And you know what? Bullying is a tough subject, but it's something we as parents and caregivers really can't ignore. We'll be looking at some great information from Nemours Kids Health and figuring out how we can tackle this head on.
Yeah, it's easy to think of bullying as just something kids go through, like it's just a normal part of growing up, but it can be really damaging, and we need to understand how deeply it can affect a child's well-being.
Right. And, I think it's really important to be clear about what bullying actually is. It goes beyond just teasing, doesn't it?
Definitely. You see, bullying is about an imbalance of power. It's intentional and it happens repeatedly. It's not just pushing and shoving either. It can be verbal abuse, psychological manipulation, social exclusion, even cyberbullying.
Wow, cyberbullying. So it's not even limited to the playground anymore. That adds a whole new level of complexity with this online world.
You're absolutely right. Cyberbullying is especially harmful because it can be constant. It can reach a really wide audience. And those hurtful messages, they can stay online forever.
That's a scary thought. It makes you realize how careful we need to be in this digital age. But going back to the basics for a minute, why do kids bully in the first place?
Well, it's complicated. Sometimes kids feel insecure and they need to feel powerful or popular, so they might try to overcompensate by putting others down. Other times they're copying what they've seen at home from their friends, even in the media.
That's something to really think about, isn't it? We often focus on the victims, but understanding the bully can be key to solving the problem. But as parents and caregivers, we need to spot the signs. But that can be tricky if kids aren't talking about it. What should we be looking out for?
It all comes down to being observant. Look for changes in your child. Mood swings, withdrawal from things they used to love, trouble sleeping, or anxiety about school or social situations.
Those are really helpful pointers. But even when we see the signs, it can be hard to get kids to open up. They often keep things bottled up, don't they? How can we encourage them to talk?
It's all about creating that safe space where they feel heard. You can use real-life situations or things you see on TV to start the conversation. Like you could ask, what do you think about that? Or have you ever seen something like this at school? Approach the topic gently.
That's a great idea. It takes the pressure off a bit. But what if they do open up to us about being bullied? How should we react?
First of all, listen calmly and let them know you believe them. It's not their fault and you're there to help. Kids stay silent for a lot of reasons. Fear, shame, self-blame. Reassure them that it's the bully who's in the wrong, not them.
It's heartbreaking to think they might be carrying that burden alone. So what are some steps we can take to address the situation?
One of the most important things is to get the school involved. Talk to their teacher, the school counselor, or the principal. Most schools have policies and resources specifically for bullying.
It's good to know there's support out there, that we're not alone in this.
Exactly. And sometimes it might be necessary to reach out to the bully's parents, ideally with the school mediating. Of course, if there are any threats of harm, that's a serious matter. We need to consider contacting the authorities.
That's a tough call to make. But safety has to come first. It's important to know we have all those options available. I can imagine that this whole experience must be incredibly draining, not just for the child, but for us as parents and caregivers too.
You're right, it's a roller coaster of emotions. Anger, protectiveness, maybe even helplessness. But remember, your child needs you now more than ever. Let them know you're a team and you'll work through this together.
That's such a powerful message. We need to give kids strategies not just for right now, but long-term strategies for building their resilience.
Absolutely. And the most important thing is emphasizing their safety. They should always tell an adult if they're being bullied, and they should avoid being alone with the bully. That's non-negotiable.
What about fighting back? Is that ever the right thing to do?
We generally advise against encouraging kids to fight back. It often makes things worse and someone could get hurt. Instead, we should focus on teaching them how to de-escalate things.
So what are some practical tips we can give them, like when they're actually face-to-face with a bully?
One good strategy is teaching them to stay calm and ignore the bully. They can practice things like counting to 10 or taking deep breaths to cool down. Walking away is another powerful tool. And the buddy system is great too. There's strength in numbers. Having a friend around can make a world of difference.
So those are some great tips for dealing with a bully in the moment. But how do we help them build that inner strength to deal with the emotional side of things? Bullying can really shake a kid's confidence.
You're right. Building self-esteem is so important. Encourage them to do activities they enjoy and are good at. Sports, music, art, anything that sparks their interest. These can help them find their passion, develop new skills, and build a positive self-image.
It's all about finding those places where they can really shine, where they can feel good about themselves.
Exactly. And it's also crucial to have those strong, supportive relationships with family and friends. Those connections give them a sense of belonging and security, which can be so important for a child who's been bullied.
It's like building that safety net of love and acceptance. Speaking of support, let's talk about the role of schools. We mentioned earlier that schools have policies and programs in place, but how can we as parents and caregivers make sure those resources are being used effectively?
That's a great question. Be proactive. Talk to teachers and school administrators, stay informed about bullying prevention initiatives, and advocate for your child's needs. If you don't feel like the school is taking your concerns seriously, don't hesitate to go to higher levels.
So it's about being involved in our children's school life and working with the school to create that safe and supportive environment.
Exactly. And remember, bullying prevention isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. We need to create a culture of kindness, respect, and empathy.
That's a really important point.
And actually, Edna, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. Cyberbullying.
Oh, absolutely. We touched on it earlier, but it really needs its own attention. It's like bullying has gone digital, and that brings a whole new set of challenges.
It definitely does. Cyberbullying can feel inescapable because it can happen 24/7, it can reach a huge audience so quickly, and those hurtful messages can stay online forever.
So what can we do to protect our kids in this digital world?
Well, the first step is awareness. Talk to your kids about online safety. Talk about using social media responsibly and the dangers of cyberbullying. Make sure they know they can always come to you if they see or experience any kind of harassment online.
Open communication is key, just like with traditional bullying. But it seems a lot trickier online.
It can be. It's also important to set clear boundaries and guidelines for internet use. Monitor their online activity, know what platforms they're using, and who they're interacting with.
That makes sense, but it's like walking a tightrope,
Mm.
especially as kids get older and they want their privacy. How do we balance respecting their independence with keeping them safe?
It is a delicate balance, but having those open and honest conversations about online risks and responsibilities, it can really make a difference. Let them know you're not trying to spy on them. You're just looking out for their well-being.
And we need to remember that cyberbullying isn't just a kid's issue. Adults can be victims too. We need to set a good example and show our kids how to interact online in a positive and respectful way.
Exactly. We're their role models, even in the digital world. But let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the emotional scars that bullying can leave behind. We mentioned this earlier, but it's worth digging a little deeper. How do we help kids cope with the emotional aftermath?
That's a really important point. Bullying can really damage a child's self-worth and leave them feeling vulnerable and insecure. What are some strategies for rebuilding their confidence and resilience?
Resilience. It's like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it gets. One way to help kids build that resilience is to encourage them to do things they enjoy, things they're good at. It could be sports, music, art, anything that helps them shine.
It's about rediscovering their strengths and building that positive self-image.
Exactly. And never underestimate those strong, supportive relationships. Family and friends, they provide that sense of belonging and security, which can be so healing. We need to help them build those supportive connections.
That's such an important reminder. We've talked about empowering kids, but let's go back to the role of schools for a minute. We said earlier that most schools have policies and programs to deal with bullying. But how can we, as parents and caregivers, make sure those resources are being used the right way? How can we be proactive?
Being proactive is key. We can't just assume the school will take care of everything. We need to be involved. Communicate regularly with teachers and school administrators. Stay informed about the school's bullying prevention initiatives. Make sure they're actually doing what they say they're going to do. And most importantly, advocate for your child. If you feel like the school isn't taking your concerns seriously, don't be afraid to speak up.
So it's about working together with the school to create a safe and supportive environment for our kids.
Exactly. It's a team effort. And we all need to be active participants. And remember, bullying prevention is not a one-time fix. It's a constant process. It's about making kindness, respect, and empathy a part of the school culture.
That's such a powerful message. Speaking of creating a culture of support, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I wanted to touch on something we haven't talked about yet. What about the bystanders, the kids who see bullying happening but don't actually take part? What role do they play in all of this?
That's a great question. You see, bystanders, they often feel like they can't do anything, like their actions won't make a difference. But the truth is they have a huge impact. Their silence can actually make the bully feel more powerful and make the victim feel even more alone. But when bystanders step up, they can completely change the situation and help create a more supportive environment.
It's like that saying, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
Exactly. The good news is that even small acts of courage can have a big impact. Speaking up, reporting the bullying, or just offering support to the victim, it can make a real difference.
So how do we encourage kids to be upstanders, not bystanders? What can we teach them to do?
That's what I'd love to explore in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned as we delve into the power of bystanders and how we can empower kids to make a positive change.
Hey there, Vanessa here again. Remember to subscribe to our podcast for more expert advice and to help us continue providing valuable content to support you on your parenting journey. Now back to Edna and Tim.
Welcome back to our deep dive on bullying. We've talked about how to spot the signs, how to empower kids, and how to work with schools. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to those bystanders. The kids who see what's happening but don't actually participate. You're saying they have more power than they think?
Right. They often feel like they can't make a difference, but their actions can really change the dynamics of bullying. When they stay silent, it can make the bully feel like they can get away with it, and it makes the victim feel even more isolated. But if they step in, they can shift the balance of power and help create a more supportive environment.
So it's really about encouraging them to speak up. But that's easier said than done, isn't it?
Absolutely. We need to teach them to recognize bullying and understand that it's serious. It's not just kids being kids. Bullying can have lasting consequences.
So we're talking about raising awareness and building empathy. But how do we actually give them the tools to take action?
We can give them concrete steps they can take, like telling the bully to stop reporting the incident to an adult or just supporting the victim.
Those are all great, but I imagine it takes a lot of courage to confront a bully, especially if they're worried about becoming a target themselves.
You're right, it's not always safe for a child to intervene directly. Sometimes the best thing they can do is walk away and tell a trusted adult.
That makes sense, teaching them to assess the situation and make a safe choice. But it's not just about what kids can do. How do we as parents and educators create a culture where being an upstander is encouraged and celebrated?
It's about creating a community where kindness, respect, and inclusivity are just part of everyday life. We need to model those positive behaviors ourselves, have bullying prevention programs in schools, and talk openly about why it's so important to stand up for others.
So it's a combination of education awareness and a supportive environment.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process. It takes commitment from everyone, parents, teachers, kids, the whole community. Bullying is a complex issue, but we can overcome it.
This deep dive has given us so much to think about. Before we go, is there one last thought you want to leave our listeners with? Something to keep this conversation going?
I think a really important question is, how can we move beyond just reacting to bullying when it happens? How can we be more proactive and create a culture of kindness and respect in every part of a child's life? It's a big question, but it's one worth thinking about.
That's a powerful question. It's about shifting from intervention to prevention, and it's something we can all work towards. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, you're not alone in this. By working together, we can create a brighter, bully-free future for all our kids.
And that's a wrap. We hope this episode has empowered you to protect your child from bullying and foster their resilience. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Until next time, let's work together to create a kinder world.